Hey guys, in this video, I want to go over how you can sell assets from your Sofi Invest account, whether they'd be things such as stocks, ETFs, or cryptocurrencies that you may own. So what you want to do is log into your Sofi account and then click on the Invest tab. That's going to take us over to our Sofi Invest page. Then we want to go down and click where it says View Account. And this brings us over to our investment page. And if you want to change the investing account that you want to sell the assets from, just click on this little down arrow right here. Select the account that you want to sell the assets from. So once you're on the proper account that you want to be selling an asset from, go down to the area where it says My Holdings. And in this area, it's going to list all of the different things that you are currently holding in the investing account that is listed up here. So whatever you want to sell, that's what you're going to be clicking on in the My Holdings area. So let's just say, for instance, I wanted to sell some AGG. This is an ETF that is in my account. So I'd click on it right here. And that brings us over to this overview page of the asset that I had clicked on, AGG, and it gives us the recent chart. Over here on the side, it gives us some different options, whether we want to buy at a recurring purchase for this asset or we can sell. So for this example, we are going to be clicking the sell option. So this takes us over to the sell order page. Now, since I only own a fractional amount of AGG, this is going to limit some of my options on how I can sell, and it's going to give the discretion over to Sofi when they execute the trade at. Now, since this isn't a very volatile asset, that's not a big deal. If you're trading in something that's extremely volatile, I wouldn't want to do one of these trades with a fractional amount of shares because you're giving the discretion over to Sofi when they're going to be executing that trade at. And if there's big swings in a short period of time, then the price could be actually quite a bit different than what the current market price is at. But to walk you through the different options here, so if you have the dollars tab clicked on, that means you're just going to type in a dollar amount that you'd want to sell. So let's say I would want to sell $25 of the $49.97 that I have in AGG. I'd type in 25 right here, click review. And like I said, since this is going to be selling a fractional amount of shares, this gives Sofi Securities the discretion to determine the time and the price of the trade. But I noted that since AGG isn't very volatile, the price that the trade is executed at probably isn't going to be all that different from what the current market price is. So this is less of a big deal than if you're trading fractional shares in something that is very volatile. So you can click place order and it would sell $25 worth of my AGG in this instance. Now I'm going to go back to the previous page and I'm going to click on shares. And there's a couple of different options here when you're trading with shares, whether you do an order type for a market price or a limit price. Now, my best case scenario when placing trades is I hope to have a full amount of shares and do a limit price, so then I can type in exactly the price that I want the trade executed at. So right now the price is at $116.84. So I could type in, for instance, $116.90, which is just a little bit above the current market price, but not so far above that you wouldn't expect it to hit that price within a reasonable amount of time. And then you could enter in the full amount of shares that you'd want to sell. But since I have a fractional amount of shares, it's not going to let me place a limit order. But for example's purposes, let's say I had 10 shares of AGG and I wanted to maybe sell 5. I could enter in 5 right here. It would give me the total order, what it would execute at for this limit price. But here you can see it says you don't have that many shares to sell. And even if I typed in like 0.25 shares, for instance, it wouldn't allow me to do this either because it says you cannot trade fractional shares when doing a limit price. So just to do a quick recap for limit price, you're only going to be able to do this with whole amounts of shares, but it is my preferred way to go about trades because you can enter in the exact price that you want the trade executed at, whereas the market price option is Sofi will execute at the current market price, and it'll be a really quick transaction more than likely if you enter in a whole amount of shares right here. Like if you owned 1 full share, you could enter in 1 right here. And then you'd click review and then place trade, and it would place that trade relatively quickly. Whereas if you're selling fractional shares like 0.25 shares, for instance, it's giving me an estimated amount as to how much this will be selling for. But when I click the review option, again, it's giving me a similar message here where since we're selling fractional shares, we're going to be granting Sofi Securities discretion to determine the time and price that this trade will execute at. But I also said this earlier where if it's not a very volatile asset, especially something like an ETF and a bond ETF like AGG, I wouldn't expect the price to be all that much different from where it currently is when Sofi would eventually execute this trade for the fractional amount of shares. So I hope this video was helpful walking you through all the different options that you have when selling your shares or whatever asset that you have with Sofi Invest. If you have fractional shares, it's going to limit what you're able to do a little bit because you're giving more discretion over to Sofi to execute that trade. Whereas if you have a full amount of shares that you're going to be selling, it's really great to just do a limit price so you know exactly what that trade is going to be executing at when you're placing your order to sell.